What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? If so, why does he let bad things happen? And who are the people who keep throwing shoes over power lines? I mean, usually perfectly good shoes. What does this mean? Now, perhaps these are kind of ridiculously dramatic questions to be opening a short video with, and spoiler alert, I'm not going to be covering any of these in this video, I'm afraid, but as always, feel free to locate conclusive investigations on the subjects at Yahoo Answers. But the point is that they're big questions, and us humans love big questions. Our ability to reason is what many philosophers, such as Aristotle, equate to being the defining feature of what it is to be a human. Which in itself implies a big question. What is it that separates us from the animals? As difficult as this question has been, and still is, we inhabitants of the 21st century are met with a further development of it that is set to challenge our definition of what it means to be human more so than ever. And that question is, what separates us from the calculators? No, not just this kind of calculator, but this kind. And more pertinently, borrowing from the world of science fiction, calculators such as the operating systems in the movie Her, or the androids in Blade Runner. Indistinguishable from human minds in almost all ways, however still not human. I refer to these artificial intelligences as calculators because when you get down to the basics, that is what they are. Instead of punching in numbers and giving you a result, these calculators are taking in sense data, processing it via algorithms, and using the results that they get to some kind of outward effect. Okay, already, this is sounding a lot like what we do as human beings, but I definitely wouldn't call you or I calculators. Surely, we're something more than that. I mean, I hope so at least. So to help us out then, we should look further at what we mean by the word calculate. This should be straightforward enough, you might think. 1 plus 1 equals 2. And that's a calculation. Let's just get on with our lives before you destroy my good mood with your pedantry and over-analysis. You're too bloody late, my friend. Sit down again, please. And let's calm down. Now, you're not completely wrong, at least. 1 plus 1 equals 2, of course. And that is an archetypal calculation. The issue, however, is that although this kind of processing of inputs and giving an output is necessary for something to be considered a calculation, it is not sufficient. That is, we might need something else. To illustrate why, please join me in imagining a hen. Now bear in mind that this is an imaginary hen, so you may colour it however you like. I'm a fan of the plaid hen, but you may prefer a monotone or metallic hen. This is both completely your decision and utterly irrelevant to the point I'm looking to make. Anyway, Marjorie, our hypothetical hen, has one egg in her nest. Oh yes, the hen is called Marjorie. Anyway, yes, Marjorie has that one egg in her nest. She then lays another egg on top. So the one egg meets another new egg, and now Marge is harbouring two of them. The important thing to note here is that although this process includes the execution of a function, namely addition, this is done whilst clearly not being a calculation of any form. It's just happening, or in other words, is simply an instance of said function. As mentioned before, although all calculations involve the processing of functions, not all functions are calculations themselves. So what could we add to this hypothetical egg-laying fiasco we've got on our hands now, in order to legitimately claim that there's a calculation going on? Well, the most straightforward solution would be to decide that Marjorie is in fact a virtual hen, operating within the bounds of a simulation. Let's say a game, and we'll call it Chicken Coop Manager 2015. That sounds fun. As Chicken Coop Manager is software and thus a calculation, everything within it is of course a calculation itself, and voila, we have a calculation of 1 egg plus 1 egg equals 2 eggs. At this point, I guess some of you were following this and thinking the distinction between a calculation and an instance of egg maths is nothing more than a squabbling over meaningless semantics. If that's you, I'd like to address that. You see, even if Chicken Coop Manager was the most sophisticated, scientifically accurate representation of real life, we still have a significant difference between its functions and those found in the real world. So important is this differentiation that I have to mention the word in my previous sentence just to make sense. Yes, that's right, it's the big R of philosophy of cognitive science, and that is representation. What does representation mean in this context? Well, you know this. A picture of a tree, obviously, represents a tree, for instance. Perhaps a specific tree, or maybe just a general idea of trees. Or maybe we've got a picture of a unicorn. Even though unicorns don't exist, the picture represents an idea of a unicorn which has been generated by someone processing and manipulating other ideas in their head. At the very least, it represents a series of thoughts the artist had when choosing what to paint. To be somewhat simplistic here, We might say that representation is the assignment of meaning to something, or perhaps even the creation of a link of intention someone has placed on a thing, an idea, or maybe like a game, or a cave painting. Well, you see what I'm saying. And this kind of assigned meaning exists by definition within everything we call a calculation. It makes sense if you think about it. 1 plus 1 equals 2 can be broken down into a series of inputs which mean something when put together. They operate as a function in an intended way and give an output that we can derive meaning from. Meaningful representation runs all the way through it like a stick of Blackpool rock. With the groundwork all in place, let's now return to our question. What separates us from the calculators? Like we originally said first time round, the similarities between a human and a sophisticated machine lie in an ability to receive input data, process it and take action accordingly. In both cases, representations are in some way involved, so we shouldn't rely on something like one deals with representations and one doesn't, as that's not necessarily true. Where a difference definitely does lie, however, is in the way the human mind manipulates information. Unlike in a calculation, there is no design applied to how the brain works. Well, that's assuming a denial of man coming from original, intelligent design. But I guess I'll have to leave that with the big questions from the start of this video, and we'll just, for the sake of argument, apply Occam's razor and assume intelligent design isn't a thing. This is important because it means that human minds process information which may be representational in substance using methods which are not representational, as who would have defined those representational references? But wait, you might say, our brains are filled with things we've learnt, which is what informs our ability to think, are potentially based in representation. Okay, you're right. However, these representationally founded functions are not what defines a brain. We are born with a vast array of functions which allow us to live, learn, and operate in the kind of ways which bring about our definition as being humans. No matter how good we get with our artificial intelligence, the mind of an AI, if you can call it a mind, will always have come from representations humans have assigned and contributed with the interest of achieving a particular effect. Humans don't have this. So what does this all mean? Well, if we take the most extreme possibilities of AI, say if we could learn how to make a machine that could then in itself learn how to become more and more human-like, that could realistically get to the kind of levels which we see in science fiction. And once that's happened, not only do we have to worry about the fall of capitalism, for more on this little worry, see the CPG Grey video I've linked below, but this question of what separates us could become more and more important. Could robots become valid members of society? And does this mean that they should be able to take part in society at an equal level to human beings? Should we be open to the idea of robots working within our political systems? And if so, is there a chance they could have any less of an understanding of what it means to be human than our current politicians? Of course, another consideration we should make in answering these questions is what the knock-on effects could be. Take something such as the field of human cloning or designer DNA. If we're editing DNA to produce an effect in how the resulting child will think or operate, does this not instill them with a degree of representative design? So if we deny robots rights based on their being calculators, is there not an argument to say that a designer brain is also, at least more so than your typical brain, to some degree a calculator? So yeah, questions. As always, when you ask a big question like this, you just really end up with more questions. But that's half the fun, really. As I said, we like questions, so if all we can do is just generate more, well, at least that's something to think about. Thank you for watching this video, and if you just take a moment, we have a word from our sponsor.
This video was sponsored by Chicken Coop Simulator 2015.
Only on Xbox.